Immigration and Customs Enforcement, aka ICE, occupies a uniquely powerful position in the American law enforcement landscape. Created in the aftermath of 9/11, the agency was granted sweeping authority under the banner of national security, authority that has expanded far beyond its original mandate. While ICE publicly frames its mission around targeting individuals with serious criminal convictions, civil rights organizations, journalists, legal scholars, and impacted communities have documented a far more troubling reality, one in which constitutional violations, racial profiling, wrongful detentions, and unchecked force are not aberrations but reoccurring features of the system. ICE operates at the intersection of immigration law and federal policing, two domains where constitutional protections are often weaker, ambiguous, or inconsistently applied. Unlike local police, ICE agents can rely on administrative warrants, which are signed by ICE supervisors rather than judges. These documents do not meet Fourth Amendment standards for home entry, yet they are routinely used in residential raids. This structured loophole creates a dangerous dynamic. ICE agents can knock on doors, demand entry, and conduct searches without the judicial oversight required of any other law enforcement agency. Civil rights attorneys argue that this framework effectively invites abuse because it relies on voluntary compliance from residents who may not understand their rights or may feel intimidated by armed federal officers. The agency's internal culture compounds the problem. Former ICE officials have described an environment where aggressive tactics are rewarded, oversight is minimal, and the pressure to meet enforcement quotas can override constitutional caution. When an agency is built on broad discretion and limited accountability, overreach becomes not just possible, but predictable. One of the most widely documented concerns involves ICE's use of warrantless home raids. Investigations by the ACLU, the Immigrant Defense Project, and multiple law schools have revealed consistent patterns. Agents arriving at homes without judicial warrants, misrepresenting themselves as local police, claiming they are searching for a specific individual, then detaining others, pressuring residents to open doors through intimidation or deception, entering homes without clear consent, and conducting searches without probable cause. These tactics have been challenged in federal court, where judges have repeatedly affirmed that ICE cannot circumvent the Fourth Amendment through coercion or trickery. Yet reports of such practices continue, suggesting that the problem is not isolated misconduct, but a systemic enforcement strategy. The human impact is profound. Families awakened to pounding on doors, children witnessed armed agents entering their homes, and entire communities learned to fear the sound of a knock. Even individuals with legal status, or U.S. citizens, can find themselves swept into questioning or temporary detention simply because they were present. Although ICE's public messaging emphasizes the targeting of non-citizens with criminal convictions, multiple investigations have revealed that U.S. citizens have been detained by ICE, sometimes for days or weeks. These wrongful detentions often stem from faulty databases, misidentification, racial profiling, and inadequate verification procedures. Lawsuits filed across the country detail cases where citizens were held in detention centers, pressured to sign documents, or nearly deported. In some instances, ICE ignored clear evidence of citizenship, relying instead on flawed internal records. These cases expose a deeper issue. ICE's enforcement tools, particularly detainers issued to local jails, are prone to error, yet they carry the weight of federal authority. When mistakes occur, the burden falls entirely on the individual to prove their own citizenship, often while detained and without access to legal counsel. ICE detention centers have been the subject of extensive scrutiny due to deaths resulting from medical neglect, inadequate mental health care, and alleged excessive force. Investigative journalists and watchdog groups have documented delayed or denied medical treatment, failure to respond to medical emergencies, use of solitary confinement on vulnerable individuals, inadequate mental health protocols, deaths that could have been prevented with basic care. Families of the deceased have filed lawsuits alleging negligence or abuse, yet accountability remains rare. Internal investigations often clear officers of wrongdoings, and external oversight is limited. The perception of federal immunity arises from the reality that federal officers are shielded by legal doctrines that make civil suits difficult and criminal prosecutions even rarer. Plaintiffs must overcome high thresholds to prove constitutional violations, and even when settlements occur, they rarely lead to structural reform. Whistleblowers and former ICE officials have described situations where agents were pressured to carry out directives that raised constitutional concerns. These include targeting individuals based on ethnicity, language, or neighborhood, conducting sweeps without individualized suspicion, prioritizing political goals over legal standards, expanding enforcement beyond stated priorities. When agents follow orders that violate constitutional rights, responsibility lies not only with individuals, but with the institutional culture that normalizes such behavior. The chain of command becomes a shield, allowing decision makers to deflect accountability while frontline agents claim they were simply following directives. ICE's door-to-door operations have been widely criticized for creating a climate of fear that extends far beyond undocumented residents. These operations often involve agents canvassing neighborhoods, questioning individuals without reasonable suspicion, detaining people who were not the stated targets, and using intimidation to gain compliance. The result is chilling effect on an entire community. People become afraid to report crimes, seek medical care, or interact with public institutions. Mixed status families, where some members are citizens and others are not, live in constant fear of separation. This fear is not incidental. It is a byproduct of enforcement strategies that prioritize numbers over nuance and intimidation over trust. ICE's public statements have often highlighted arrests of individuals with serious criminal convictions. These announcements create the impression that the agency focuses exclusively on dangerous offenders. However, independent analysis of ICE arrest data reveal that many individuals detained have minor offenses, no criminal history, and old convictions unrelated to public safety. This discrepancy between messaging and reality fuels distrust and raises questions about transparency. When an agency's public narrative does not match its operational behavior, accountability becomes even more difficult. The concerns outlined in this video, warrantless searches, wrongful detentions, excessive force, questionable orders, and community intimidation, point to a deeper structural issue. ICE operates with extraordinary power and insufficient oversight. Reform proposals from civil rights activists include requiring judicial warrants for home raids, strengthening oversight of detention centers, improving data accuracy to prevent wrongful detentions, creating independent review boards, limiting ICE's jurisdiction and authority, increasing transparency and enforcement priorities, ending the use of administrative warrants for home entry. These reforms aim not to undermine public safety, but to ensure that enforcement aligns with constitutional principles and human rights. ICE's power is vast, its discretion broad, and its accountability mechanisms weak. The patterns documented by civil rights organizations, journalists, and impacted communities reveal an agency whose practices often conflict with constitutional protections and human dignity. While ICE presents itself as a force for public safety, the lived experiences of many Americans, including citizens, tell a more complicated story. The debate over ICE is not merely about immigration policy. It is about the balance between security and liberty, the meaning of constitutional rights, and the kind of nation the United States aspires to be. When a federal agency operates in the shadows of limited oversight, the risk of abuse becomes not a possibility, but an inevitability. Addressing these concerns requires not only policy reform, but a fundamental re-examination of how power is exercised and restrained in a democratic society.